What's happening, peoples? How's everyone? Here we are again, having those conversations. Thanks for joining. See me out of breath. You can't hear me? What do you mean you can't hear me? Who cannot hear me? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Please let me know, because someone says they can't hear me. I can hear fine, lovely. It's probably Jody with the volume turned down. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so look, we've got someone who's going to join us tonight. Thank you very much, guys. My tech. You're not alone. We've got someone who's going to join in the show in a moment, and this is a really important learning space, this particular topic. So this is a listener who offered to share their story and to ask questions. I'm sure you all are going to have questions. Again, learning space for social workers and other professionals as well. We can't make the same mistakes as we've been making in the past. So I'm going to bring her on now. My name's Claire, and she's going to be really frank. So treat my guest nicely. Give her lots of love. Hands up. She's going to share a lot. How's everyone? Just to let you all know, listen, I've got my Patreon page there. My Patreon. If you click the link in the bio, click the Patreon. Click on the Patreon link, and you can join. And if you need advice and support, join the page. Join the page. Claire, my guest, she's going to share a lot.
Hi.
I think you need to mute. Patreon page there. Are you on your laptop as well?
Yeah, I have. I've just closed it down on the laptop though because it's extremely delayed.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to turn it up on my phone and play it on there because I can't do it off my laptop at all.
No, it won't work on a laptop. I don't think it will.
No, it doesn't work on a laptop at all. I was desperately trying, but no, absolutely none of it. And it was about 5 minutes delayed as well. So you were still doing your intro as it had loaded on my phone.
Yeah, it's about 10, 15 seconds. Yeah, that's what it is.
Really delayed, so.
But listen, good to have you.
Thank you.
I was just telling everyone what you're about to give us. And just before we come to you, Claire, guys, again, you know, my Patreon page is there. Click on the links, a link in my bio to access all of what I've got in terms of resources and access to content. My exclusive content is on the Patreon page. But this is a really good learning space, guys. And I think for Claire, she comes from a slightly different angle.
Uh-huh.
And I want you to know that this is, I'm trying to allow social services, because the media has done such a terrible job.
I agree.
I want social services to be reasonably transparent to the public. That's why we're here.
Yeah.
To have discussions about things. And that's why I invite people on who will critique social services. I don't mind. Let's have it. There are a lot of haters out there, and some posts I put out, it's murderation. That's what we call it. We called it back in the 80s.
There is a lot of bad. There is a lot of bad, but predominantly through my own trials and tribulations with social services, it does need to be recognised that it's not all social workers.
Okay.
Same as it's not all men. It's same as it's not all anybody. But there is a minority within social services that does contribute towards an already predominant bias from the general public.
Yeah, lovely. So let's get straight into it. Thank you, Charlie. Charlie, I'm guessing you're listening. Claire, introduce yourself and then tell us why you're here and how you got here.
So, how did I get here? I'm currently year 2 law student. Had a very, very rocky past. Riddled with anxiety, riddled with PTSD, have history of DV relationships. And, you know, that's scary in itself, trying to put yourself out there. Accompanied with imposter syndrome, I think. I think I, for myself, needed to put myself out there more as a professional, having been through the things that I have, rather than I am the things that I've been through. I think I've reached a point within my own development where I am separate from my previous, but it is still very much a part of my development, not only professionally, but personally. Heavy involvement from social services from quite a young age. I went through the care system, came out of the care system and had care support for early care leavers, so age of 16, independent living. Very volatile relationships with family, very volatile relationships following suit in terms of intimate partner relationships. And then going forwards, having my own children, realised quite how heavy that burden would impact me in terms of involvement going forwards.
All right. So what, in a nutshell, in one sentence, if you can, tell us what you want to talk about today.
I have various topics of conversation.
What's the first one?
I myself, through my law degree, genuinely think that social services are heavily overburdened. They were set up initially to support families to access particular areas of social support development, and we have kind of moved away from that in terms of the broad variety of risks that now present. Some of them predominantly can be sorted through community support, and I don't think there's enough of that. But a lot of them do need the draconian result of child removal. I think that because social services is so heavily burdened and there isn't enough support in terms of community support that is already in place, there are a lot of children that are being removed, and there are a lot of draconian results for parents, when actually just a longer period of community access support could facilitate less removals. That's where I'm coming from. In terms of the safeguarding triangle, mental health, domestic abuse, substance misuse, I think that those three outlets of community support are way overstretched. And I genuinely feel that social services potentially need a secondary outlet for those three safeguarding triangle safeguarding issues that run separately to open community access, because those are actually the three predominant issues for which children are removed because of. Because actually, in terms of a longer plan, it's harder to negotiate whether or not there can be a turn of change, whether or not there can be an infrastructure in place to support the parents or whoever is caring for that child to develop themselves mentally, socially, within their own chaos. If actually there was a separate infrastructure alongside community support that was solely reliant on child protection plans, child in need plans, PLO plans, child removal, and actually the aftercare of child removal, I think that we would see a massive turnaround in terms of the potential future risk of emotional harm, future risk of child removal, future risk of any risk, because...
Well, hold on. Let's pause a sec. Where do you want to start? Because as far as I'm aware, you've got a life story.
My story.
You want to start with your story? Okay, start from what age are you starting at?
I was heavily let down by just any service while I was going through school. I grew up through the 90s. There wasn't enough social awareness of mental health issues and how that impacts. I know it's a really difficult topic, but
so don't rush, because
medical programs themselves, right, in terms of ADHD, Asperger's, and autism, there are a lot of medical benchmarks that are predominantly set on a male specific rather than a female specific. So Asperger's, ADHD, all of those things present very, very differently in females to what they do in males. And I think it's very easy for psychological assessors, psychiatric assessors, or just any assessors in general to benchmark a female's reaction to abuse or potentially undiagnosed ADHD, undiagnosed any mental health disorder really, as being borderline personality disorder, or the now renamed emotionally unstable personality disorder. That can assist in social services and courts removals.
Okay, pause. Let's try and get a grip of what you're saying. So you're saying that it is
it's a general thing. I don't think it's one particular area, but I think that social services need a very clear supportive network in terms of diagnosis of mental health disorders, in terms of support for ongoing mental health disorders, substance abuse, domestic abuse. I think as much as those things exist, social services kind of need their own go-to support network to be able to move forward to support families.
Okay, properly. Hold on. I need to summarize because I need to make sure we're clear.
That's fine.
You said a lot. Let's go back.
There is a lot.
So are you saying that social services do not have a go-to to what? To what though? To what?
Underlyingly, anything. And I don't mean that in an offensive way. I really
no offense. No offense.
I think that there are pinch markers within each area that are kind of the extremity of each. Some people aren't at the extremity, but actually some involvement can push people to extremities. And
hold on. So what you're saying is there are a lot of people who have got like maybe medium level.
Yeah.
And then they migrate to extreme when it's not dealt with at the medium level.
Exactly.
All right.
I genuinely want to set up a business plan to support social services going forwards to predominantly reduce the amount of children removed under the safeguarding triangle of mental health, domestic abuse, and substance abuse. A lot of cases do contain all three. Some don't, some do. There are a lot of cases that contain elements of all three. So one partner has mental health and they are self-medicating with recreational drugs. That in turn is then exacerbating the mental health problems. It potentially is creating domestic issues between partner and partner. And then it's almost like a fueling circle of how do we stop one problem to stop the other problems, because how do you stop it?
Oh, is that a question?
How do you stop it?
How do you stop what?
How do you
Now,
stop
before you
the
ask the question,
safeguarding triangle?
one sec, Caroline. Claire, sorry. Guys, the nature of this particular session, yeah, is going to be Claire's got questions for me, and I'm going to put them out there to you as well, because we want to understand more. But Claire has very valid, whether we agree or not, she has very valid questions and points. But this is, again, just remember, it's a lot of learning. The topic is down below. It's a pinned comment.
Real life story and critique of social services.
Perfect.
I think that has to be the key point of every social worker's development throughout their entire career. Same as it will be for me as a family and criminal law solicitor, same as it should be for any professional getting involved with any of these situations. How can we contribute to this, to progress it, to stop certain things happening again? How can we make things better? How can we change things? How can we develop things? What models can we put in place to try and support people better? What models can we put in place to support professionals better? Because it's not just about people, you know, that are involved with social services. It's yourself as social workers. There are a lot of questions, some of which I wrote down, some of which will probably just come up.
Yeah, sure.
That actually, you know, new age social workers probably going to be like, well, actually, why don't we do things like that? And why isn't it like this? And actually, that topic of conversation creates the development for change, which is why it's healthy.
So ask a question then.
So first of all, what community support would be beneficial to support less removals under the safeguarding triangle of domestic abuse, substance and, well, any substance abuse, and mental health?
Well, how do we deal with this question? I'm up for it, guys. Did you get the question?
Because you know it's important.
My brain is going faster than my mouth, and there's a gateway in my head that says, "Think before you speak, Curtis." So you'll hear me huff and wave my head around and all that. Did you get the question, guys? Ask the questions again, please.
And it's genuine. This is not just for you. This is for other social workers too.
I'll ask the question again.
What community support would be beneficial alongside social services, I add, to support less removals of children under the safeguarding triangle of domestic abuse, mental health issues, and substance misuse?
All right. So I'm led to believe that every local authority does have a service, a funded service to support each one of those, but they will be individual. And I'm guessing what you're saying is, do they need to not be one?
Yeah.
So what you're saying that you want someone, a service I can go to.
I have to set this up, and this is what I want to do.
So what you're saying is that you want a service where I can go to Claire's hub.
Yeah.
And she's going to help me with substance misuse, mental health, and domestic violence all in one.
Yeah. It's like somebody's just pointed out, it needs to be an integrated service with specialists. It shouldn't be a separate issue. We shouldn't be signposting people out on child protection issues.
But aren't they separate issues?
No, not if the fundamental basis of that is a child protection. And that's why I said to you, I know that these exist outside of, but if the predominant issue is child protection, and that's coming as a direct result from you guys, should we not have a separate hub that you guys can access and other people can access that consolidates all of that support network and goes, this is what we need to do. This is what we need to fix. This is the time frame we've got to fix it in. If we get to this time frame and we're realising that X, Y, and Z hasn't been done, we need to be going to PLO. We need to be going to Section 47. We need to be going to court. What can we encompass within that community support network that assists you guys, assists families, assists everybody? What can I provide in terms of setting up a business that will help all of that?
So why don't you think that they're good separate?
Because they're not. Because they all feed into each other. They're all part of the same issue. And if you keep separating issues off, you'll never deal with the fundamental basis of it. A heroin addict will always go and rob a shop. Until you deal with the fundamental issue, which is their addiction, you will never overcome their criminal activity. So this isn't just accessing the judicial system. This isn't just accessing probation. This isn't just accessing drugs and alcohol counselling. Unless you get to the fundamental basis of why someone behaves the way they do, which every single person on this planet does, you will never fix a problem. That's like me saying to you, well, there's a leak on a tap about 150 yards up the road, but it's dripping my tap. But if we just tighten my tap, it'll fix it. Well, it doesn't, because that creates a backlog of problems, because you're not dealing with the original source of problem. Whereas if we can work alongside you guys and fix the original problem, I know that children have been removed on the basis of the fact that parents have been identified as having borderline personality disorder or whatever else. It takes a year and a half for therapy, doesn't fit in with the child's time frame, child has to be removed. What about if we switch that round?
And do what?
Okay, it's going to take a year and a half to fix this. What do we need to put in place now? How do we support this parent to be a better parent? What can we do to put a support network in place so that this parent isn't as vulnerable as what they were?
Do you not think that we do that?
No.
But bear in mind, Claire, I'm having a discussion with you, so don't think I'm coming off too hard on you, yeah?
No, I don't.
But I have to, I'm testing the discussion. Don't you think we do that already?
No, I don't, because I don't think you have the resources and the funding to do so. That's across the board.
So that's a government issue now, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah.
It's not local authority.
It is, yeah. Where's your funding? Because that's what you guys were set up for. You guys were set up to build families to be better. Whereas the first port of call now is, wherever there's a problem, let's just get ourselves out of it quick. Let's remove ourselves from liability. We've got too many cases that are going to court and that are going through media that involve us. Like you said last night, it is predominantly focused on white girl syndrome, and it is. And I can say that I understand that logic because I see it myself. It is. There are more than one issues, but how do you get to the bottom of it? Do we need to go to government, and do we need to say, actually, we need an outside governing body that assesses social services, that assesses where our funding's going, that assesses why our CEOs are paid so much, but yet there is nothing in the pot to provide community-based services? How many child contact centres have been shut down over the past 10 years?
Okay. Would you follow me a second, yeah? I'm going to ask you some questions. Don't answer if you don't feel comfortable, although we did talk before. How many children do you have?
4.
Do you mind giving roughly their ages? Between...
Firstborn, 2008.
Oh, you better give me an age, mate.
14.
14, okay.
Next one is 2011. So, what? 12? 12 this year.
14, 12.
No, 11 this year, sorry.
14, 11. Yeah.
I have a 3-year-old that was born in 2019, and I have a 5-month-old that was born June this year.
Okay. Do you have all your children?
No, I do not.
Do you mind talking about it?
Not at all.
Okay. Do you mind going back to your story? Because what I want to do is I want to feed your story into your concern. All right. When did we get involved in your life as a parent?
2008.
Do you mind saying why?
November of, somebody else put a referral through that my partner at the time had hit me that hard that I did a 360-degree spin before landing on the sofa, that he was verbally and physically abusive, and that he was taking my daughter at the time out while I was asleep to pick up narcotics.
Say that last bit again.
That while I was asleep, he was taking our daughter at the time to pick up narcotics, so
Right.
drugs.
Right.
Not one of the referrals related to me. Oh, there was another referral that went through a week after that said that while I was out of the room, an Xbox controller had slid down the side of the sofa and skimmed the top of my daughter's head. And that my partner at the time, while I wasn't present, had thrown our daughter up to catch her, and her head had skimmed the ceiling. Not one complaint related to me.
Okay.
When social services attended, I broke down and said, I'm in an abusive relationship.
Pause there. How long were you in that? In how many years were you in an abusive relationship?
By that point, July 2006 until January 2009.
About 3 years.
Off the back of being made homeless by my mum, who was a narcissist, yeah.
Okay. So
in and out of care.
Yeah. We'll come to that part. We're just looking at you as a parent at the moment, yeah? So skimmed her head on the ceiling, and you spoke to social services and you said, look,
They said, we have absolutely no issue with you as a parent.
Yeah.
And I went, okay. So where do we go from here? And she said, because of the nature of the complaints, I need to ask you a few more details. Asked me a few more details, asked about my relationship, and then left. And I, as a very vulnerable and very reliant individual on my partner's family, because I didn't really have any of my own, rang his mum and said, we've just had social services out. Me and my partner at the time have got a problem. She went, what problem? I then went on to tell her that although social services and nobody else was aware, my partner had been feeding me heroin from 16 until 18. So I was reliant on heroin. I knew that I was smoking weed at 16, and he was putting it in my spliffs. We're talking a deep-seated level of abuse. I had no family, no support network, nobody else. I had one social worker who said, I really think that you need to move away from this. But I couldn't. I had no access to funding. I had no access to money. I had no access to transport. I couldn't drive. I didn't have any support at all. Just stayed. Because it was the only person I had. At 16, 17, 18. Didn't use any substances at all while I was pregnant. That was proved by hair strand testing. But did continue to use after having it. Couldn't cope with the level of abuse that I was being subjected to, and just wanted to, I don't know, I guess just not feel it.
Are you alright to keep talking?
Yeah.
Yeah, you stop when you're ready, okay?
It's a hard graft subject. I'm still going through trauma therapy now because there's a lot to go through. I asked social services for help, and we went from the March of 2009 to November the 13th, 2009, the day I came out of rehab, with only me being the predominant parent, being put forward on a case file at court for the child to be reunited with.
Hold on, I've missed something now.
We had care proceedings.
Right.
There was a lot of violence.
Yeah.
My ex-partner was turning up to social services meetings drunk. He was insinuating that he had provided clean screens when I wasn't clean. There was a lot going on. So social services did, correctly so, by the way, decide that we needed to go to court because they were like, I don't even know what's going on. I don't know who to believe. I don't know what's going on. They took us to court. I asked my mum to have my daughter. She passed my daughter to my abuser's mother. And I think there is a very blunt ignorance to parental alienation when it comes to abusive relationships. And I don't think that's just social services. I think that's social services, CAFCAS, the court. I think that it is recognised enough in the severity that it is. Parental alienation is.
Can I just cut you a second? I just want to just let the audience know. The comments in the backdrop, perfectly fine. Have your discussions. Just be careful what you say. Particularly.
I haven't seen any of the comments.
No, you don't worry. I can because I have to. Just be careful what is said. By all means, put your comments through, but just be careful about what is said. Yeah, go ahead, Claire.
Well, I absolutely agree. It wasn't right for my children to be around drugs. Absolutely wasn't. And I've just had my daughter 5 months ago, and I had her by C-section, which means that I was put on heavily prescribed medications such as morphine, such as cocodamol, tramadol, and I was also put on paracetamol, ibuprofen, and various other things. And it was through that, and I've had the conversation with my daughter's health visitor today, that I said, I thought I was okay. In the middle of heroin addiction, in the middle of all of that abuse, I genuinely thought I was okay.
What does that mean? What does that mean?
I thought I was okay as a parent. I was feeding her. I was getting her up. I was changing her nappy. Yeah. I was providing for her. I was doing a food shop. I weaned her on time. I did every single basic that you would need to do for a parent.
Yeah.
But I also disattached. I disassociated. I didn't want to be in the moment because I was being heavily abused. And
what do you mean by disassociated?
I used heroin. What's the biggest disassociation from life going on? Heroin. You disassociate emotionally, mentally, physical capacity. And I don't think that people in the moment, speaking from experience, genuinely realised quite how much they're putting that child at risk. Because it took for me a social worker turning up on an unannounced visit while I was heavily medicated with morphine, cocodamol, heavy ibuprofen and paracetamol, to the point where I was physically fighting to stay awake. And I was like, I can't even articulate a conversation with you. For it to re-trigger me to be, you were a really bad mum 14 years ago. You really weren't there for your kids as much as you thought you were. And I know that my capacity in terms of my addiction would have been different, but the fundamental basis of my ability to emotionally connect with my children still wouldn't have been there.
Pause there. I want to understand what not connecting with your children looks like.
If you aren't able to connect with yourself in terms of everyday life, trauma that you've been through, everyday life, everyday emotions, anything, if you aren't able to connect with that at all, you can't provide for your children on a psychological or an emotional front, because that's how they connect. They are at a completely different stage of a development to what you are as an adult. I absolutely advocate that psychology should be a part of every secondary child's education, because if you learn the fundamental basis of psychology, you would never want to make a mistake again in your life, because you'd be like, oh my God, I didn't even realise that could cause so much trauma to somebody else. But I absolutely think that it is an essential part of a learning development of any potential parent. Absolutely. And that's coming from a place where I did my access course at like 30 and then went on to do my degree at 31. So, you know, there was a good period of time where I wasn't aware of quite how severe my actions were in terms of the psycho-emotional development of my children. That cut deep. But nobody told me. Nobody made me aware. Nobody helped me to understand why it was so important. Nobody gave me the ability to be able to develop that skill set even. Like, there was nothing. It was just a straight up, we need to safeguard the child. Yeah, get it, remove her. I'm going to go to rehab, sort my little old self out. I was the only parent down to have my child back until the day I came out of rehab. And as I walked out of the doors of the rehabilitation centre at Coton House in Stafford, my mum got a phone call from a social worker. He's fighting her for custody. And that needs to be recognised by any future social worker as a massive red flag for abuse.
Explain.
So, abuse stems from an overriding need for control, especially when it comes to domestic abuse. Now, that can be control within yourself as a person, control within yourself as a relationship, or control within the children, or all of it. There are various sectors of domestic abuse, and I personally don't feel that there are enough trauma-informed social workers currently active in every area.
What difference would that make?
Massive difference, because it would teach you red flags in terms of how the parent that you're talking to is reacting to what you're saying. So there are certain traffic light triggers in terms of, if I said to you, well, why are you putting kids at risk? You'd be like, what are you on about? like, I'm not putting my kids at risk. Whereas somebody that is subjective to abuse, that would be a massive trigger. Like, what? And it would create a massive emotional reaction in terms of their ability to cognitively and emotionally process that question. That might be seen as aggression, but actually it's not. It's a trauma response, because they genuinely don't understand. Because from a domestic abuse survivor's perspective, you're staying in that relationship to protect your children and yourself. One of the biggest triggers for domestic abuse to progress is the termination of a relationship. And there are a lot of people that will stay in a relationship because they are fearful of the outcome of events if they terminate that relationship, because the biggest projection of escalation is the loss of control.
So how did
the termination of the relationship? They know that they've lost control, so they have to exacerbate.
So how did you end yours?
I mean, I got police involved. I decided to turn like a full-ball ghetto and threaten them with everything under the sun, because genuinely, sometimes that's the only way it works. And I think by that point, through my progression as an individual and where I was at, I had enough connections to be able to make those threats safely.
Such as?
I'd been put in enough unsafe predicaments that people had seen and wanted to support. Some people aren't afforded that safety. I've had drug dealers from my ex-partner sit there and say, you know, if he kicks off, ring me. That's not a reliable source of support. Don't get me wrong.
But that's what yours was.
That's what yours was. I'm saying.
Yeah.
But when you have people that will support county lines, children being trafficked from area to area to sell drugs, they sit there and say to you, if you need help, I'll help you. That's when you kind of know things ain't right. And it's true. You know, sometimes it takes having that massive outside progression or perspective even for you to sit there and go, I've literally got drug dealers telling me I'm not safe here. Like, what the hell is going on? And sometimes it is that outside perspective that makes you go, what am I even doing? Actually, I am paying all the bills on my own. I am supporting myself. Actually, my mental health would be so much better. Actually, do you know what? I really need to develop myself as a person. I need to get better. I need to sort myself out. But there is always potentially the threat that if you are still affiliating with less than legal affiliations, there is always a threat of, well, if you leave me, I'm going to tell social services you're doing rah, rah, rah. And that in itself is coercive control. Don't get me wrong, it's a safeguarding issue for social services, but for the victim of abuse, that is so...
You see, I'm not here to criticize. I'm here to learn. So my question, can I go back a little bit?
Yeah.
At the time, I'm guessing you had 3 children at the time.
I had Leah.
No names. Don't give any names if you can.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So I had my first daughter.
Yeah.
Had her removed because my ex-partner moved in with his mum, who had care of my child because my mum had given her my child. And because she was deemed to be safe, my ex-partner moved in with her and predominantly kept care under a child arrangements order that he stayed at his mum's for a minimum of 3 years, which he did. What social services didn't know is that his mum was driving to her house at 2 o'clock in the morning to bring her son heroin. and I couldn't prove it. So it was dismissed. Because I was the fictitious ex, right? I was the one raising safeguarding concerns for no reason, right? I was a crazy ex that needed to get retribution for some warped sense of, I don't know, injustice, right? My story wasn't recognised for the truth it was. I have now been assessed by social services no less than 37 times, including recently. My children are still on the child protection plan because I've had children removed previously. My second child was removed because of domestic abuse. I was attacked for an hour, had a knife held to my throat, and because the police turned up in a time frame that had allowed me to wake my child up to try and get her out of the house, they assumed she was awake throughout the entirety of the attack. That was what was put forward to the court. It was supported by every single person that was involved, that I was the safeguarding concern, despite the fact that my kids were on a child protection plan, despite the fact I hadn't been showed the 15 pages of criminal record that my partner at the time had, despite the fact that I attempted to access Clare's Law and wasn't afforded it.
Can I ask?
I put my child at risk.
Can I ask? How can I ask this question? Were you in? It sounds like you couldn't leave the relationship you were in, and so obviously getting pregnant and having children.
Do not release him from prison back to my house. I've read his pre-sentence report. I've seen his previous. I recognise the risk. Please do not allow him to be released from prison back to my house. It was released from prison the 13th of January 2006. I went to court a week later, on the 20th of January, 23rd of January 2006, and was, with support of social services, granted full custody of my child at the time. Secondary child, not the first one, second one. 2 days later, that night, I was subjected to an hour's. I was strangled. I had my head smashed against a radiator. I had a knife held to my throat. I was kicked in the face. I was strangled. I was dragged downstairs by my hair. An hour's continuous subjective abuse. To then be stood against the wall with a knife held to my throat, to the point where I was that scared that my child would come downstairs and find me in the morning that I wet myself. I was still stood in front of the court 2 days later as the predominant reason that my child was put at risk. Probation hadn't turned up to any safeguarding meetings. There was no information sharing of anything, but I'd put my child at risk. Don't get me wrong, I own that. I did. I got into a relationship following abuse that I didn't check in every single way possible.
Right. What does that mean? Check in every single way. What do you mean?
There are Clare's laws. There are certain things that you can do, but I do genuinely feel like at the time I did everything that I reasonably could do. I don't think that I was supported enough by professionals. Probation didn't information share. Social services didn't information share. Police didn't even information share. There was nothing. My children were on a child protection plan because at the time I was in rented accommodation that was private rented, and my landlord wanted the house back. So we were potentially going to be homeless. The only reason that my children were on the child protection plan at the time was because we were going to be was deemed to be a potential factor in. I need to put my phone on charge. So. If I was a potential factor in me being made homeless, my children would take priority over me. Absolutely, they should. But that's why I was on a child protection plan. Nothing to do with my partner at the time. No information share. But then 2 days after I was attacked, I was stood in front of a court and they were like, what happened? And I was like, I don't even know how to explain to you what happened. We were having an argument and it got out of hand. Like, I can't 2 days after a traumatic incident explain to you what happened other than we were arguing and it got out of hand. I don't know what more information to give you because I'm struggling to process it myself. And that was after being previously trauma informed.
If I was a social worker, what do you think I should have seen or said?
I'm sorry you were let down. I'm sorry you didn't receive the support. We're going to put that support in place now.
I'm talking about at the time.
Yeah. What do you need from us?
No. So obviously, police have made contact with social services because of what's happened. Sorry. And then what do you wish the social worker would have seen at the time?
All of the previous. The phone calls that I made to the social worker saying, I don't want him back here. There's a lot of stuff that should have been done differently.
What do you think what do you wish you would have said at the time if you could?
Why wasn't I afforded the support that I should have been given through this process?
So I'm going to ask the question again. I'm going to rephrase it. Because the social worker obviously couldn't hear you for any number of reasons, right? So my question to you is...
Well, that's another potential issue because the social worker at the time had dealt with my friends previously and had wrote my name down while my friend was in labour and I was in the room. So there was a potential conflict of interest.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, let's say it was me then, right?
I mean...
Let's say I was there at the time, no conflict of interest. What do you wish you had the ability to say that you think would have changed a lot?
I pressed charges, like literally the next day. I was in communication with the police the whole time I was at the hospital. The police were with me. Like, I need you to understand where I'm at in terms of trying to process the fact that somebody I thought I was in a relationship with, somebody I thought I was building a future with, somebody that I thought was going to be a significant part of my child's and my life has turned out to be an abuser. I need you to support me to just process that for a quick minute. And it might not take a quick minute. It might take about 6 months. It might take about a year. Because it's trauma. And our brain's really good at switching off from trauma. I don't know if you've ever spoken to anyone yourself who's been through trauma as a child. A lot of child trauma is replaced with other memories. Like, they don't even remember being present. They're like, what? I didn't see that. Yeah, you did. And I know that from personal experience, by the way. There are parts of my childhood I don't remember. I replaced it with something else. That's not what I saw at the time. I remember this happening. And it is so far removed. But actually, that's the brain trying to protect itself from further trauma. Doesn't want to remember what you got subjected to. So when you're questioning the parent and saying what happened, and they're going, I don't even know, it was an argument that got out of hand. Actually, that's all they are at the capacity psychologically to be able to process. Like, I don't even know. Like, I don't know what happened. All I can process is we were having an argument and then this happened and I don't even know how. That's being trauma informed.
You know what, I just want to go to a comment. Bonsi Edwards, listen, if you're a social worker, it'd be great. But if not, I appreciate what you're saying. This is really helping me see clearly. And there's a lot of learning here for social workers. Sometimes
There is.
We have to read a little bit between the lines. Is a lot of what you're saying. If I was being hardlined, you can't leave the hospital until modules are complete. All right. Well, yeah, interesting.
Yeah, that's true.
You couldn't leave the hospital till you've done your parenting
I was
module.
on child protection. I could not leave the hospital until I'd had safeguarding meetings for both of my children that are upstairs, the youngest. There wasn't really any need for my youngest to be on child protection.
I was just going to ask you, do you think they're on
I'm still
child
on
protection?
child protection now.
Are they on child protection now? Two of them.
Still to this day, yeah.
And how long have they been on that?
3 weeks before I gave birth, so that was
6 months. Because the youngest is 5 months, right? So 3 weeks before is about 6 months.
What's a week before the 26th of May? Because 26th of May, we received paperwork to step us up to
yeah, 6 months. So do you...
But social services had already been involved for 4 months.
Okay, so 10 months roughly we're involved, yeah? So my question to you is, do you feel that it is in any way justified for you to have your children on a child protection plan?
Initially, I absolutely understood the reason. If my children had been placed on a child protection immediately, I would have absolutely got it.
You feel that you needed it?
I have. It's not the fact that I think I need it. Social services needed it.
What do you mean?
In terms of being able to complete the assessments that you need to complete, there is a certain... on child in need, I don't have to comply. If I don't want to comply with you, I don't have to comply. Under a certain percentage of safeguarding, I absolutely agree that initially I had a new relationship. You didn't know anything about my partner. There were issues with him 15 years ago. There were NFA charges from, 5, 6 years ago. There was my own child removal. Absolutely understand. However, I had an assessment done last September that was positive, that said I didn't need any involvement, there were no concerns. And even when we got to PLO, I was told, we don't have any concerns about you. There's an NFA charge of your partner. Now, that was one of my questions. Should NFA charges still be considered during child protection?
Yes.
Why?
Cool. Interesting.
Yeah.
Thank you for your question. I just want to say, before I even get into it,
there are some interesting questions.
Well done for being where you are now. All right. Second,
I'm now on year 2 of a law degree. I'm now in a completely different place to where I was years ago. But that's part of my fundamental request for this. Because at what point do we leave the past in the past?
I think it just depends on what you do with the past. The past is with us. We are the past. We are the present.
All the past, but at what point does that get accredited that, wow,
it's what you do with it. But
from here to here to here, at what point do we say absolute recognition for that?
All right. So look, let's answer the first question.
Answer the first question.
So if your partner, if you've had domestic violence in your relationship, he's been hitting you, for example, and it goes to the police, he's been arrested, he might have been on remand, or he's on bail. Should social services, what's the question now?
Should people with NFA charges still be considered, should NFA charges still be considered during child protection?
Right. So the question I've got for you, and maybe the audience as well, right, is what if that's happened 3 times?
What if it happens once and the report states
all right,
that the other partner...
Let's answer both. So
yeah,
let's say 3 times, first
3
scenario.
times.
There's a pattern.
There's a pattern.
Because,
absolutely.
Right. Let's say there's no... Let's say it's been... Because to be fair, it could have been happening many times more, but it's only come to the police attention.
Absolutely.
Right.
Fully support that. And I
So-
don't want anybody to think otherwise. I fully support that. There is a pattern. There is
Yeah.
a clear distinction that this particular individual is behaving a certain way.
So
That's
what we
completely
see,
different.
we see a combination of things. We see actually this 7-year-old child, their behaviour has changed. It's a sign that they're going through something at home. Number one. Number two, we've got this this gentleman, this father, who there's an allegation, but we don't have the evidence to prosecute.
No.
Which is completely different to, is there a concern or a risk being presented to the child?
But that's because your benchmark is predominantly lower than criminal law.
Yeah.
Because the benchmark...
Or in a sense, higher. It depends how you look at it. What do you mean? What do you mean?
Yours is lower. Criminal law, it's proved beyond reasonable doubt
Yes.
that somebody has behaved, done, acted, whatever, a certain particular fact, whatever.
We can prove in front of a jury.
It has to be proved beyond reasonable doubt that they have done what the prosecution is accusing. In a civil court, that benchmark is considerably lower. And I have to say,
yes,
most cases, even on criminal, you come out of prison.
Yeah.
You get to move on with your life. There is a majority of cases that are classed as spent, which means you get to carry on your life perfectly fine. When it comes to child removal, benchmarks considerably lower based on the likelihood of probability. You are making draconian, not you, courts are making draconian decisions based on where a child should live and whether they should or should not be removed based on the likelihood of probability. Now,
come on, I'm challenging you now. Hold on. But look,
in a civil court, your benchmark is based on.
It's more. I'm going to tell you why. Look, it's a combination because the courts don't do the assessments; they analyze the assessments, right? And those assessments come from, they have to, from police.
I mean, they kind of do, but social services play a heavy weight in family court.
This is what I'm saying, that the courts have got a very high standard. So when it comes to removing a child, they're going to look at the information that's coming. They're going to ask questions. Sometimes these decisions are deferred because we don't have the information. So it's not, when we say draconian, the role of a judge, it's black. It's pretty much black and white, because their decision is going to be either loved or hated. So they're going to look at what are the teachers saying, what is the social services saying. Now, forget the conspiracy where they conspire to cover up information.
Is it though?
But that's what it is. That report is made up of a lot of information.
Genuinely,
police, etc.
This isn't just from personal perspective. I respect social workers, ambulance staff, police, fire brigade. There are certain positions of authority that absolutely need protecting. And I have seen your lives before, and I have seen you say there are certain houses, there are certain situations, there are certain environments that you as a social worker were expected to go into. Police are like, no, I ain't going near that. Are you mad?
Yeah.
I've seen his previous. I ain't going near that.
Yeah.
So why aren't you cameraed, babe? Why aren't you cameraed? You should be cameraed.
Hold on. Is it another question?
Not just for the family's protection, but yours.
Hold on. Is this another question?
Yes.
Okay. Should we wear cameras to evidence? Is what you're asking.
Not just for protection, but also for evidentiary purposes. Because let's take it back to a criminal court. We have to have evidence that proves beyond a reasonable doubt.
So when I have a camera on me and I walk into someone's home,
if you walk into somebody's house and they're lighting up a crack bar, You've got the facts there. Let's be straight and honest.
You can
right?
take pictures on your phone.
You've got the facts there. If you walk into somebody's house and there's machetes all over the wall, let's just go for the extremity, okay? But there's also the not extremity.
I don't know how much.
You walk into somebody's house.
Yeah.
And she sat crying on the sofa.
Yeah.
Because she needs your help.
Yeah.
She needs the emotional support. She needs the psychological support. Where is your evidence to say, I've walked in on this, this is what I've seen, this is what we need to do?
All right. Can I answer this, please? Let me answer. If I walked in someone's home and they know the camera's on, how will they behave?
But if they don't know you're turning up,
yeah, but it's going to become common knowledge that social workers have cameras.
Don't do unannounced visits, because I know full well they do. And
Yeah,
if you're receiving complaints and you're saying, right, okay, we've got a safeguarding issue here, and it doesn't matter.
Do you think people would let me in their house if they knew I was recording?
Doesn't matter. Do they let police into the house when police are recording? They ain't got choice.
Yeah, but it's accepted with police, but it's not accepted with social workers.
Why is it not acceptable with social workers? Is it not for your protection too?
I agree. But, but I think you need to
go into unknown circumstances.
I'm not just saying,
Claire,
I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just discussing the topic of.
But should they?
One of the key things. They're using cameras on the World Cup right now. I've never seen so much VAR.
Well, yeah,
it's driving me
social
nuts.
workers are expected to go into vulnerable and dangerous situations with no protection for themselves or others.
This is the thing. It's a discussion. I'm not going to try and conclude. Yeah, social workers need to complete unannounced visits. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying I can imagine how bad it would be, because one of the key things that we use as social workers, good social workers, to work with people in situations is to build relationships. And I think the camera will be a barrier.
But what do you think affects the ability for parents to build relationships with their social worker when their social worker is the front line of every single situation that's being raised as safeguarding?
I'm not going to argue anymore. You know why? Because we talk about this. Me and my colleagues talk about it. I don't know the answer.
I don't even want to argue. It's not even an argument.
No, it's a good discussion.
And I get it. I've had kids removed and I still get it. I sat there and had a conversation with my social worker 2 days ago and I said, do you know what? I don't even dislike you on a personal level. This isn't even about person. I would invite you to my wedding next year. I would invite you to whatever. This isn't personal. You're just the front line of social services that I get to see every day, that I can genuinely face. What is going on? What is this person doing? What's that person doing? And it is. I said to her, it's really hard because you are unfortunately the front line of all of that frustration. How do we remove that? How do we stop it? Do we introduce cameras? What's the significant time frame for people to not have involvement from following a child removal? Do we always need to have involvement following a child removal? Are there enough trauma-informed social workers? Does personal bias affect how we see each of the cases? You know, I will see, you know, you were talking about it yesterday and she was like, well, you know, when I first went to my first one, I was like, oh my God, what is this? But actually having worked in it for a couple of years, okay, who's sober, who's not sober, at what point is this a risk? That's because of her development as a social worker. Are we doing enough to inform trainee social workers that actually certain situations just are certain situations?
What does that mean? Certain situations are certain situations.
I could walk into a room now of somebody that I know from 20 years ago, not feeling the slightest bit intimidated, not scared, nothing. Somebody else who's never met them before could walk into the same room and be like, what have I just walked into?
Yeah.
I know them. I've built
Yeah.
up that rapport. I've built up that relationship over 20 years. I know that they're not a risk to me. I know that they will be an absolute lapdog unless you create certain triggers,
Yeah.
certain situations, certain benchmarkers that turn them into a Rottweiler.
Yeah.
Somebody else walking into that would be like, this is a Rottweiler out and out. Do we need to create more of a situation for upcoming social workers where their own personal bias doesn't create bias within their profession?
But we are trained heavily on, we call it, we have to do a lot of critical reflection.
But you also can't remove personal bias.
But this is my point. You only remove it if you want to.
Yeah.
So
And I
we are
agree.
trained in that. You can have someone with a degree and a master's and a doctorate in it, in a lot of things. It doesn't mean they're doing well. You've got GPs basically who train for 7 years in health and still drinking and smoking. So,
Also leaving kids abroad on their own.
wow.
I mean, there is that.
You want to go down that road?
I mean, it's there in black and white, let's be honest.
But this is the point. It's like you're asking the question, but I think you've answered it at the same time.
But how far does it go? Like, how far does this go? Because there are social workers like you. My other half will absolutely not even speak to our social worker at this point. He's like, I'm done. I'm not speaking to them. I'm done communicating. I'm done. My prehistoric was 15 years ago. Like, when are you going to let my past be my past? Also myself. You're trying to drag up, and I sat there and said outright to our social worker, I will not discuss anything prior to September last year. Because that's when there was a change of circumstances. Prior to that, if you can't find on your own records what you're trying to reassess, that's on you. I'm not having you re-trigger me. I'm not having you re-traumatize me. And that's not me being some kind of hard face, I'm going to make your life harder for you. I was heavily pregnant. I then went through an emergency C-section. I had a traumatic time in surgery to the point where I had to be put under. I got rushed back in 4 days later. It was hard graft.
So can I ask
don't
a
need
question?
you talking to me about anything that happened 12
Can I
years
ask a
ago.
question then? So I don't know if I asked this question already, and maybe I did, but I think you've brought it up in my head to ask it again. Do you feel in any way justified that your children should be on a child protection plan now?
Right this very second, no.
All right.
Understood it completely if it was the offset.
Yeah.
You needed to assess a new relationship. I was very vulnerable. I was pregnant. I had a lot of pregnancy complications. I had hyperemesis.
So what do you think social services are concerned about?
Right now, nothing. We're just stuck in a process that drags. And because ours is under the specific benchmark it takes 6 months to come off.
Okay.
So you yourself will know exactly which benchmark.
And I you know, I think that's about as well. And just for understanding's sake, I think that when we see certain, I mean, I think that from your story, it sounds like you were let down. But I think that when we see category,
it wasn't even just that. Like,
sorry, let me just finish this point. Sorry, when we see certain categories of abuse and neglect, at the end is usually death, and so there is what might be perceived as an overreaction. But we're only so much involved in your life. We see the kids only so often. We have to make a lot of assumptions because of that, and so it is a very protective way of moving forward. But yeah, I mean that's the only thing. Yeah, go on.
Absolutely agree with what you're saying. If I was still living in Birmingham, but I don't, and that is a genuine. I would absolutely agree with every single word you've just said. If I was still living in Birmingham, which is a city. Because what seems to be a predominant issue in social services is you don't have a benchmark threshold of safeguarding across the board.
That is a question
And
to
there
the guys
should
now.
be.
Should we have a one standard safeguarding for every type of neglect, or should we treat you as an individual?
But if you deal with it on a fundamental basis as this is what it is, this is what we're highlighting as, this is what it's benchmarked as, let's move away from that in terms of every single area. I know that if we still lived in Birmingham, we wouldn't have the level of involvement that we have at the moment, because I've only recently moved back from Birmingham. So I know what their threshold is because I've had communication with them and not had the level of involvement. They've got too much to deal with. Birmingham's got a whole variety of issues. My little itty bitty issue isn't anything to them. Where I live now, little tiny area, town, village, whatever, it's an issue. And actually, it shouldn't be that different. It shouldn't matter whether I live in Birmingham, Nottingham, Liverpool, Bristol, Bath. It should not matter if I live in an itty bitty bitty little town, village, whatever. We should still have the same safeguarding.
You can't.
You have to.
You can't.
How?
There is, every local authority has a Children's Act, okay? Various sections within it, okay?
Yeah.
Now that is your foundation, and then you've got a threshold, say, document.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
that threshold document can vary slightly through every local,
it can.
but they're generally the same. And some areas in the UK may have specific issues for which they kind of modify their thresholds to say, this is how we have to deal with it. But in London, that issue isn't so great and we can manage it pretty well. So the thresholds are adjusted.
How do you know you can manage it well? How do you know you can manage it well?
We just go by history.
Okay. So who's assessing that history other than social services?
I'm not sure what the question is.
Who is assessing whether or not social services are capable of assessing that issue and the relevance per parameter other than the area of social services itself?
Social services is governed by government.
Yeah.
So what they do, they look at statistics, and the statistics will tell you what we're doing well and what we're not doing well in.
Government have afforded the responsibility of social services unto itself. So it's a self-governed body.
Yes, it does pretty well though.
Does it?
Yeah.
Are you talking about that from a working perspective or from a...
I'm completely objective. I'm looking, I mean, the training that we go on is...
By the way, I'm not talking about this from your level.
Yeah.
I'm talking about how...
No, to be fair, it comes from top. Yeah, what we have comes from top.
Down.
It does. And don't get me wrong, social services, just like the BBC, is very self-critical, and it's reasonably public with that. It is. Now, you're going to find flaws everywhere.
I don't think that the BBC is self-critical at all.
But it allows itself to be transparently critical. It's the only channel that does it. Yeah, it's the only channel that does it.
I mean,
shows.
I can get quite blunt with that point on BBC because they self-funded a paedophile for several years.
But like I said, you will never escape these flaws.
But and I'm not disputing that we can't.
The system is there. The system is there.
And I'm not disputing for 1 second that we can't, because actually it's people, it's not institutions, it's not situations, it is people. And there are a certain classification of people, namely narcissists, that thrive on a position of power. And I think over and above social workers, you generally tend to get a consensus of particular individuals. And it's not just within social services, this is across the board of any profession, any burden of responsibility.
Same with police, right?
You will, this is anywhere. This is not an attack on social services per se. It's just within any setting of hierarchy.
Yeah.
The higher up you go, the more closely to a narcissist you find the personality traits.
They might be the best leaders, who knows?
I mean,
Donald Trump,
certainly lining their own pockets, aren't they? But that also creates a very, very, very dangerous backlash downfalling that people on the baseline level of it can't actually speak out because otherwise they will be sacked.
You mean frontline?
Yes.
Yeah. Now,
which then creates further problems for frontline workers like yourself and like other social workers that are trying to make things different.
Right, let me be fair. In social care, I'm doing it now.
You are.
No, but don't get me wrong. In social care, you can speak out. But we have to do it in a professional manner or in a manner that is conducive, because you can be reckless.
Basically, you can't say that your employer is wrong.
Well, who's my employer?
The government and social services. You can't outright say they are wrong. We had this discussion yesterday, and every single one of you at certain points was like, oh, I want to say something, but I can't. Because when we had the conversation about Madeleine McCann and the way that things should have been dealt, there are certain things that social workers, ambulance workers, police, it's not just about social services. There is a variety of domestic abuse support workers, family support workers, family practitioners, GPs. There is a massive group of people that want to speak out and want to say certain things, but can't.
No, you know what?
I'm not necessarily trying to feed into a conspiracy there either.
No. Okay, let me
there
respond.
is a lot of red tape on a certain...
Let me respond. And I want you to know I really appreciate how this is going, because this is how I like to have discussions. But let me respond. I get that the whistleblowing policies that are in place across civil service hasn't flowed equally across.
No, it hasn't at all.
I can speak for social services in that, like social services, when it came to the Madeleine McCann case, we didn't even get the case.
No, I know you didn't.
It hasn't been referred to us, but we don't just dive into cases. So it's not as simple as like.
But from
one of my first lessons in uni was teaching us that we have to challenge culture.
Yeah.
So what I'm saying to you is, we are not where we want to be, but we're on our way. So let me just say it again. We're not where we want to be, but we're on our way. But as far as I'm aware, and you heard it from the social workers last night, they're going to voice up if they don't like something. If something's dodgy or going to be creating more problems for a family or creating more safeguarding risks.
No.
We're going to speak up.
But then,
you
could transfer that over. I'm currently doing a law degree. I know that there are specific cases of trafficked individuals that aren't aware of our culture, that aren't aware of our laws, that aren't aware of our guidelines, that have committed heinous acts against children.
Yeah.
Because where they originate from, that is the social norm, that is the legality, that's okay.
What's your point there? I didn't get that.
Because if you transfer that over, if you're not teaching people about the burden of responsibility, if you're not teaching them about what's wrong and right, if you're not teaching them about information sharing, how do you expect them to know it? because there are people that are trafficked. There are people that don't know certain things.
Mm.
And, you know, I'll go so far as to say that there are low-income families that aren't of a particular academic level that are raising children that will follow suit. It's the same kind of scenario, but just a little bit different.
Now, I remember you spoke about, we spoke about this off camera
yeah,
about
we did, yeah.
And to be fair, I mean, that's going to have to be another topic now, and I'm happy to come back to it.
Yeah, that's fine.
I tell you what, we've got 5 minutes because it's an hour and a half now, and that flew by. That's what it always does. It just
really quick.
What I want to know is from you, tell us about what you want to do.
I genuinely want to create a change within not just social services, police, ambulance staff, just across the board of professional, even legal services, domestic abuse services. There needs to be a change of the way that we perceive certain people in certain situations. There needs to be a lot more of an uprising of more trauma-informed professionals.
Right.
Across the board.
Because that will help us work together.
Massively.
Yeah.
I genuinely want to set up a business plan that supports social services and the other community-based support networks like domestic, like Women's Aid, like, you know, particular drug agencies per area. I genuinely think that there needs to be a separate system for people that are either accessing or have accessed social services previously. And I genuinely think that that needs to be dealt with separately, rather than, oh, well, we'll go to such and such for this information, and we'll go to here for this. Why aren't you accessing it?
You want a more cohesive service
network that works alongside social services, so
social
services can say, okay, it's going to take a year for this parent to reach this point. So what we need to do is we need to implement child removal counselling. We need to implement domestic abuse counselling. We need to implement child contact centre arrangements. We need to implement this, and this. And what we need to get to is a point where in a year we work with the family to reintroduce that child back to the parents, if possible. I'm fully aware that in some circumstances that is absolutely not possible at all, but in a lot of cases it is. Why aren't we doing more to support parents to have their children back? I haven't seen my kids for 6 years. Yeah, I know. I'm fully aware of that. But actually, what can we do to rebel against that? Can we rebel against that? Can we create enough of a stand for army to go, now hang on a minute here, you've got social workers, police officers, domestic abuse, you've got lawyers, you've got everybody standing together and saying, give us the affordability to be able to make these changes? Or is it just about tightening your purse strings and creating a cash flow system? I mean, I know the answer. I think you know the answer as well. But what can we do to change that going forwards? Can we do anything to change that?
I think my personal encouragement, I says, let's take off the social worker hat now. If you have a dream, you chase it. It will grow, it will develop, and it will evolve. If you build it, there's a saying that I believe strongly in, and it came from a movie that I heard, Field of Dreams, years back. And it was saying, if you build it, they will come.
I planted my seed on my first child removal.
Yeah.
And it's grown and grown and grown. And I have recognised over the years how many people needed to take a little bit of feed from my soil. There are a lot of people that want to change. They just don't quite know how. And I think if we introduce something that works alongside all of the things that are currently prevalent, social services, drug and alcohol, just everything, not even like just specific issues, everything, if we can just build back that sense of community. It takes a village to raise children. It doesn't take just two individuals. It takes support. It takes networking. It takes creativity. It takes support. It takes a lot of things to raise children. Like, if we can create that back and put that back into society, surely to goodness we can reduce, even just reducing the amount of children that are removed. 3.2 children per family on this little island that's called England are removed for various different reasons. That's an insane amount of children. Where are they going? Where are they going to end up? They're going to end up back into the system. They're regenerating the next growth of task working for social workers. The next generation coming through university are getting our kids. And then the next generation after that are going to get their kids. And it's just a feed society. At what point do we start feeding back into society rather than drawing from it? What do we need to do? How much work do we need to put in? How much effort? What things do we need to put in place to stimulate society, to stimulate community, to stimulate growth? This isn't just about businesses. It's not just about finances. It's about emotional support, educational support. Like, where does it end and where does it start? And how far do we need to go down to fix it? Because I think we're over a generation where we keep plastering over it. I think what we need to do now is find the root problem. And rather than just keep putting a plaster, fix it. Fix it at the root cause, whatever that is.
See that last comment?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do.
Right. We're going to have to hold it there.
That's fine.
I've got a couple of things to say. First is, if it's any encouragement, it starts at home.
I know.
Number two, guys, show your love, please, to Claire.
Thank you.
Your heart is big, and I want you to keep that fire burning, as they say. Build it. Just consistently water that vision. And I want to also thank you. We didn't even get to cover everything to talk about, I'm sure, but I want to thank you for putting your story out there. Your story, someone already said it, and I believe story, what we do with the past is what you are doing with the past. And it's like you take your past and you use it to build something.
Absolutely.
To live and thrive off of. So your story is going to save, someone said it, I think, in the comments already, your story is...
Some people don't have that in what I do, though. They aren't capable of doing that. They don't have the self-reflection. They don't have the tools to be able to know that they're powered to be able to create change. They just don't know.
But here you are.
I am, yeah.
Yeah, no, but you know, this is it.
To be reckoned with.
It's a spark that starts a fire, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Massive.
You've got a very unique vision, and it's a spark that starts a fire. You've got a lot of support here. Guys, follow. I don't remember your what's your username on here?
Jaffa Cakes.
I remember.
Because who doesn't like Jaffa Cakes?
Jaffa Cakes, that's it.
Yes.
Jaffa Cake Freak. Okay, I get it.
Yeah, Jaffa Cakes are life.
Thank you so much, guys. I'm going to leave it there. You know me, I could go on all night, but I've got work at 7:30. I've got work at 7:30 in the morning.
I've got two kids to get up with.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
To go to sleep.
But again, I can't thank you.
I also have a criminal law assignment and various prep work for uni. So yeah.
Yeah, no, we can't thank you enough for coming on.
Thank you,
guys. Follow Jaffa Cakes, please, and support her.
I'm quite happy to put my link in the comments if you want me to.
Say that again.
I'm quite happy to put my link in the comments if you want me to.
Yeah, go on then. Yeah, do that.
Yeah,
Before we end. Yeah, what an amazing show. I mean, some tough questions, and I'm up for that. I'm up for tough questions, but I think we're on a journey, all of us, as we network on showing you what is behind the curtain of society. Jaffa Cakes are life.
Yes,
they're about 95p right now.
Jaffa cakes are life. If you don't eat Jaffa cakes, there's some fundamental issue.
Something wrong with you.
I mean, if I was a social worker and I went to someone's, I'd be deeply concerned if people didn't like Jaffa cakes.
Are you talking about eating the orange jelly out?
You have to eat the whole outside first and then eat the
look
middle.
at that.
That is just the unwritten rule of how you eat Jaffa cakes.
That's the law. That should be the law.
It's the law. I can vouch for that.
Guys, thank you so much. Claire,
Thank you.
well done for making this far. Stay strong. I'm sure you will.
Thank you
And
so much.
we'll speak soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for enabling me to be able to put my voice across on your platform.
Cool.
It genuinely means a lot.
And just to let you all know, there is one more live tomorrow night, 8 p.m. Blessings, guys. Take care.
Yeah, bye.